You're listening to Dating After DV. Real stories, expert insights, and deep healing from women who've been there. Together, we're breaking the silence, naming the patterns, and rising from toxic to true love. You're not starting over, you're starting stronger. With me, your host, Christy. Welcome back to another episode. Today we have Lorna Barnes.
I'm a certified professional counselor and counseling therapist. I live in Alberta. I live in a small city right now, and I do most of my counseling online at this point. I used to have an office before COVID. A lot of things, people can say a lot of things are before COVID, right? And I've been doing this for about 22 years. I've worked with teens. I've worked with couples. I've worked with individuals. I prefer to work with a lot of people exactly about the topic we're talking about today.
And you've worked with me. You were
Yes.
one of my therapists while I was going through all of my stuff in April 2023. And I was so grateful to have found you. At the time, I was diving right into therapy. So not only did I have you, I had someone on BetterHelp as well. And the difference that you made was, besides actually understanding and having your own personal experience with and training in dealing with narcissistic patterns and the cycle of abuse, that's what made the difference for me and really where this project came out of, and having this education give it more of a voice. It's never something I had heard of. I have a master's in sociology, like I've mentioned. I've studied people and human behavior and had no idea that there was stuff like this floating in murky waters. So really excited to have you share your knowledge and some examples with us today. Could we start with cycle of abuse? Is there a top-down explanation, start to finish, or the dynamic? Could you speak to that for us a bit?
Sure. Yeah, the cycle of abuse, people will look at it like some say 3 stages, some say 4 stages. I tend to talk about 4 stages. And you think of it as a cycle. So usually you see a diagram of it, and it's a circle. And it usually starts with tension build up in a relationship. Now, this can be between a parent-child. It can be between boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, different dynamics. And it's usually one person has control over the other in a lot of way. And so the first thing that happens is in the relationship, there's tension. It's a tension buildup. Usually this has gone on in the relationship for a while. And so the victim, and just by the way, when I talk about abuser and victim, I will, for our purposes, I will say the abuser is male and the victim is female. But I see so many people who have had mothers who are very extremely abusive. And a lot of times it's mother-in-laws and that kind of thing. It's really quite something. But in a relationship, the abuser is starting to get very tense, and the victim usually notices something happened. They come home from work and they're angry, or maybe they're not talking, maybe silent treatment, that kind of thing. In my own experience, that was my father, who would just walk into the house and there wasn't a word said. Then you knew,
Yeah.
and so it's that build up. And usually that's because the abuser feels powerless. Most abusers have come from a lot of abuse themselves. And so they've felt very out of control when they were young. And so what they do is most of the time, they actually make a vow to not be that out of control when they're an adult. I'm going to not live that way. And so they're a very insecure person who is just so determined not to feel out of control that they become like a bully. And of course, with some abuse, way more of an enhanced bully when it gets really, really serious abuse. So that's the tension buildup.
Okay.
The victim usually would try to placate or try to appease or try to do something kind or ask a lot of questions like, are you okay? Are you okay? Because they're noticing the buildup. There's times that what the victim will do is they will actually cause an argument because they want to get it over with. because the
Mm,
next stage is an incident, and the incident is often a violent incident, either sexual, physical, that kind of thing, or verbal. And verbal can include gaslighting and manipulating and humiliation. There's so many different tactics they use. What they're trying to do is they're trying to wear down their victim, is what they're trying to do. So there's this incident. Sometimes they're breaking property. Sometimes they're hurting children. Sometimes they're hurting your pets. It can come in all forms. Sometimes the things I hear are like, wow, I haven't heard that one before. There's so many ways that people hurt other people. And I always say, hurt people hurt people. So the abuser is a person who's a very hurt person, is what's
mhm.
going on. And a lot of people look at it as, oh, he's so strong and he's so confident in himself, but it's not that at all. So then there's usually a reconciliation stage where it goes into, oh, I'm so sorry. Now I compare the cycle of abuse to narcissism as well. And so if it's a cycle of abuse and there's no narcissism, then usually the abuser can feel sorry, and they will apologize and, oh, why did I lose it so much? But then they find themselves back in the cycle again. They're out of control because they were
Mm.
so out of control when they were a child, and they can't stop this thing from happening. With narcissism, they won't say, I'm sorry. They'll apologize if it's convenient somehow in a manipulative thing.
Yeah.
That's when they might apologize. Sometimes they'll use love bombing during that time that they're reconciling, like trying to be really nice because they're trying to make up for what happened. Sometimes love bombing is also because they're afraid that the victim will leave
Yeah.
sometimes. And so they start being really nice. Suddenly they'll buy flowers. Suddenly they'll, hey, how about we go out for coffee today? And how about we
Mm.
have a good time? Or they'll bring gifts, that kind of thing. And then most of the time there's a period of calm after that for a little while. But then, and the cycles are different lengths. It can be within a week or something that suddenly there's tension again. Sometimes it's within a month or 2 or 6 months that there's tension again, and it builds up again and it goes around in that cycle again. So, so yeah, that's the cycle of abuse. Yeah.
Right. So I hadn't even considered that this can be with or without narcissism. Would there be a different way to handle it? Let's say there's someone listening and I feel like I've done a lot of research and working with you. When it's a narcissistic situation, it seems like there's a lot less you can do. You got to just get out of there and no contact. But with
Yes.
when it's not that case, is there something that you could see the victim, let's say, to do to dismantle this? Or is it the same where they just kind of have to get out?
Most of the time they have to get out. It really depends. Like sometimes in a situation like that, you can give that person an ultimatum and you
Mm.
can say, I think we have good things going for us and we could build a really good relationship here, but you need to deal with what's going on in your life and why you are getting into these states of out of control. And so then you give them an ultimatum. You say, if this doesn't happen, and usually it's like you need to go to therapy, you need to address this, because especially when they're feeling bad that they lost control like that, they might be willing to go for therapy, and they might be in therapy and realize, well, I didn't realize that. I didn't. And many people that have been very out of control when they're a child or abused when they're a child, they've taken on responsibility. They believe that it is their fault. They must have caused their parents divorce, or they must have caused their parents fight, or because children don't know better.
Yeah.
They cannot think like an adult. And so they grow up with this shame in their lives. They think they're this terrible person. So sometimes they might have the attitude, well, it doesn't matter anyway. I'm just gonna live the way I want. They become like selfish or whatever. But there, some of those people, they are at the point where they'd be willing to look at themselves and go for anger management, or if there's an addiction involved, to go for addiction treatment. And suddenly you have them coming out completely different. But narcissism, that is a place where they have shut down their emotions. They have no empathy. they've had so much abuse in their life that something snapped in their brain. The ability for a child to completely shut down seems impossible in some way, but I think if a person's through enough abuse, that's what happens. And those people, yeah, the chances of them changing is extremely slim. Like they usually just get worse over time.
I'm curious now, hearing the difference. Is there a difference in what someone experienced that determines whether they become narcissistic or whether they are just in a cycle of abuse that they are able to get out of? What makes the difference whether someone goes through abuse and turns out more narcissistic or has this ability to change? Because in relationships, like, that's our whole thing is we're like, maybe they'll change, right?
Usually the abuse, and by the way, that the abuse they've been through in their childhood, most of the time they don't share it because they in fact feel like they're at fault and all that. But when you do hear about their stories and what they've been through in the past, it is usually pretty horrendous abuse. But people are all different personalities or different, like we're all different, right?
Mm.
And so one child, what will impact them really seriously can be something vastly different than what somebody else has experienced. Horrendous abuse, like sexual abuse when you're young, or physical abuse, that you're to the point of passing out, or you've like serious things like a child being thrown down the stairs and they get a concussion, or who knows. There's a lot of like serious abuse out there. But I'm
Mm.
surprised in my work sometimes of it doesn't necessarily have to be that extreme serious. I think so much about it is the fact that a child needs to feel safe. A child needs to feel like they're nurtured. They're provided with what they need to thrive in their life, right? And so if they don't receive that, it's seriously traumatizing, or they take some kind of responsibility that
Mm.
is not theirs to take. Like I just had an example of a client, her mother used to sing a song to her all the time. And the song talked about being happy. And the daughter took it on. And she was only young at the time, but she took it on as if it was her job to make her mother happy. And
Oh, wow.
it ruined her life. Like that's not even like abuse. The mother
Yeah.
didn't mean nothing. But so it
Wow.
depends on how the child perceives it. So
Yeah, like identifying with it, what they make it mean. A question about the second stage. You were saying there's a violent incident, whether it's sexual, physical, verbal, which can include the gaslighting. And you said that they're trying to wear down the victim. Is that the point of the second stage? Or is it just like that tension bursts and the abuser doesn't know what to do with it and it just explodes outward? Or is it like pointed at destruction of the victim?
yeah, that would refer probably more to narcissism, because a narcissistic person, what they're looking for is to have a supply in their lives. And because they've made that vow, they will never be out of control. So they want to control. And so they want to like almost get into torturing somebody. They want so much control. And what happens is when they see that person in pain, they're they're seeing the face of the person is just so traumatized by the things they're saying to them. They see that fear in their eyes. That is what makes that abuser feel very powerful. And that's their point. They want to feel powerful. So they want to really destroy, try to destroy, but only to the point that the person doesn't leave, because they don't want them to leave. Sometimes an abuser will leave because the person that they're trying to abuse is too strong, or it's not fun anymore. It's like they've done enough. It's weird.
Interesting. So, the cycle of abuse we've been talking about, of course, a relationship doesn't start with this. It starts with wonderful seeming and the rose colored glasses. Can you tell us what you see and maybe red flags to watch for? Because I know from myself dating after DV, it was like, is this person being nice to me or is this like, it was very hard to tell. So, are there some tells or red flags that you would recommend people or that you listen for that keys you into like the cycle of abuse is not far away?
Mhm. Well, they come across in a knight in shining armor. And it's kind of crazy because you young girls hear that maybe that used to be more years ago, but it's like, oh, the knight in shining armor's going to come and save me or
Yeah.
protect me or
Be a
I'm going to,
princess.
yeah, make me a princess and I'm going to go live in a castle,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But, but if there's intense affection or intense gift giving, like the relationship comes on really strong and you're like, what? I married somebody like my father was abusive and I married somebody like my father. And in 3 weeks, he said, I think I want to marry you.
Mm,
You don't know if you want to marry this person because you don't know the person. They will voice love very quickly. Like, oh, I love you so much. I love spending time with you, but they don't even know you. So
right.
that's definitely a red flag. You usually see some dishonesty or they don't keep their promises. They lie about where they are. They make excuses but they're trying to be really careful at that point because at this stage they're in love bombing. They're trying to get you to want to be with them. So they're gonna do all this gift giving, all this nice stuff, and they promise you the world. And but you'll notice even in public, when they're with your friends or with your family, they're always trying to impress. Or if they come to your work, they'll or they might not even come to your work, but they'll send flowers and your coworkers were like, wow, that's so neat. But this person is doing that for a reason. They
Mm,
are trying to draw you in. That is the main thing is that they're trying to draw you in, but they will eventually say things like, well, maybe I should say it this way. If you have plans with family or with friends or something, they will often choose to plan something on that particular day and because they don't want you to be with friends or family because they want to keep you isolated. And so they'll plan something. And then if you say, no, I want to spend time with my family or my friends, they'll, well, what do you mean? You don't want to be with me? I thought we had such a great relationship. I love you so much. You're my future wife, or it's these kinds of things. And sometimes women, especially if I'm probably answering the question beyond, but a victim in that case is a person that's very vulnerable. And doesn't know what they're looking for. They think they're looking for, like in my marriage, it was looking for love and being happily ever after. That's what I thought. But I knew I shouldn't get involved with him. I knew I shouldn't marry him. But it's because of the fact that I already came from abuse and I was very vulnerable. I had no self esteem. I did not know how to stand up for myself. I had no boundaries. And so, due to that, I got drawn into this, even though I knew I shouldn't. And I think part of that too is it's familiar. You're used to
yeah.
abuse, and somehow you think you can handle it. But of course, you can't, but you're not even familiar with what a healthy relationship is a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so, you wouldn't know what to do with somebody who comes and is actually showing you genuine love and because you don't recognize it.
Yeah. When I met my now husband, I actually broke up with him in the beginning. It was something silly. He didn't answer for a couple of hours. And so I thought this was like the pulling back. And I was like, I'm not doing this again. And he's like, whoa, I didn't have reception for a couple of hours. Let's talk about this later. And I was like, oh, so, so
Yeah.
you said that they'll mention love early. How early is too early? Or because sometimes even when you have a really nice connection with someone, you spend a lot of time with them, it can feel really like I feel like I love you, right? And you feel like you get to know them really fast. What would you say is too early? Or you did say that like they don't know you yet, but is there a timeline on that?
If you don't see a lot of these other signs that I talked about, like if you're seeing a lot of them, then you should be suspicious and then you should be like, okay. And especially, of course, within weeks or a few months that they're saying if that's too early. But
Um,
if you you've been together for 6 months, you might already know. And some people just know, like, this is my second half. This is like, I know, and healthy people can tell that, like,
Mm,
usually because they know what they want. They have good boundaries. They realize the other person has good boundaries. They're able to speak freely, able to feel safe in the situation. And so they would know, but I always recommend not to get married for, like, if you're going to get into a relationship or something, wait for at least a year or maybe even 2 years. It's always better to wait longer because sometimes you're surprised. Like,
yeah.
even after knowing somebody for quite some time, and as soon as you're together, you're in your home together. That's of course when most of the time, and especially if it's marriage, because it's harder to get out of that, right? And
Yes.
or you buy a house together or something
Right.
like that. Those kinds of things. Then you feel much more stuck, and the abuser knows that, and that's when everything hangs out, and suddenly you're like, wow, I didn't know he did this, and that was so cruel what he just did. I thought I had this wonderful, amazing person here. Yeah. So it's always better to know people. Like my first husband, it was after 3 weeks, he said, I want to marry you. And after 7 months, we were married, and I was just out of high school.
Oh, wow.
And he was over 9 years, like he was 9.5 years older than I was. And that in itself was a red flag. And I always describe it this way, is growing up in abuse, that at 19, when I got married, I was as if I was the maturity of a 12-year-old, you know?
Yeah. There's no room for emotions in that situation. How are you supposed to learn to manage them, right?
Yeah. So true.
So I've heard that someone can't hold a mask up for longer than 90 days or 6 months. But I've also heard of people, well, claiming that someone completely changed after they got married or after they get pregnant, right? And one question I've had is, do people actually change like that after years of knowing them? Or has there been these hints along the way that we either don't see or don't notice or we don't want to notice?
Most of the time there's hints, there's something we're making excuses, but it can happen after pregnancy sometimes. I've had that type of clients where it's like they've gone through postpartum. There's just a lot of changes, and the husband isn't handling it well either. Sometimes it can be, sometimes they lose it because they've had a job loss or something. They're not handling it well. And I think so many times it's like people come out of abusive childhoods and they have this attitude, I'm just going to get out of here and I'm just going to start my life and I'm going to be fine. And then they live their life and they don't realize they're dysfunctional in a lot of ways. They can be the nicest person, and suddenly something snaps, and that can be caused by something like a job loss or something
Mhm.
difficult like a miscarriage or whatever it is. And sometimes people are diagnosed with something like bipolar or something
Yeah.
that seems to have a later onset. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you're already married and you're not, like, and it doesn't mean that all bipolar people are violent, of course, but
Right.
but sometimes there's
Yeah.
something behind that like that. So
Yeah. In sometimes in well, in these toxic relationships, especially from my experience too, I experienced a lot of internalizing, the hyper responsibility, the like, is this my fault? The blame shifting happens, and it was hard for me to understand where at the time not really having any boundaries and also not having low self worth, value, whatever it is, such that any treatment or behavior is okay. Where could someone draw the line where they know in that cognitive dissonance and in that confusion with like, no, no, this is where the line is. This is not my fault. What would you maybe say to someone who's in that confusion of maybe I caused this?
usually I tend to go into kind of educating about people pleasing, codependency, and I explore what they've experienced. If I haven't by that point, I explore what they've experienced in their childhood, because a person becomes a people pleaser or becomes codependent, has no boundaries, because usually there's some kind of abuse that's happened. And they've already taken responsibility from when they're very young for things that they shouldn't have. They've experienced some kind of trauma. And so then if they think it's their fault and that kind of thing, it's because they're doing the same thing as they did as a child. And they think that, oh, I must have caused my boyfriend to get angry, or
Mhm.
they don't know where the boundaries are. And they're the kind of people that will apologize for everything because they're taking too much responsibility. They usually struggle with saying no. So they're very easily to control. And abusers actually look for that. They sense it. They know that this is a vulnerable person and I can abuse this person. It's like they're just drawn, like years ago when I went for counseling, my counselor said to me, Lorna, if you don't stop walking with your head hanging down, and your shoulders slumped, you're going to attract another person like that, because it's how you hold yourself shows you have no confidence.
Hmm.
Somebody who wants to go and control somebody, they're going to go after that. Just like in high school or in junior high, like somebody who gets bullied is that person who looks very vulnerable, usually
Mhm.
insecure. They're the ones that are going to get bullied. And often they're feeling like the self-esteem is so low, they're taking all this responsibility that they're
Right.
at fault.
So now I'm wondering if this is a difference between narcissism and not, where I've heard that before, that they'll go for the vulnerable person who just wants that love, right? But I've also heard, specifically with conversations about narcissism, where they'll go for the confident, successful, beautiful, popular person because they want that for themselves. And the whole goal is like to break that person down and then really hate them when their light is gone. Have you seen cases like that, or do you see that distinction between the vulnerable, and is that a narcissism thing?
It is a narcissism thing. Sometimes they want a challenge and they are going
Yeah.
to try to break down a person that's confident. But most of the time, that person that's confident as well and doing well, very well in life, most of the time, they they would know when they're being manipulated. They would, if they're in a healthy place in their life, they have good boundaries, they would know. They would not very easily be manipulated. But it's that person who they have experienced some kind of abuse or something in their past, but
Mhm.
they've been very successful in their life because many people, when they come out of abuse, they're not just this victim and look vulnerable. They're a
Yeah.
person who works very hard to accomplish things when they're proving themselves. And so sometimes
Mm.
they can move through their life and be so successful, look very, very confident. They educate themselves. They know so much about different things, but they've never dealt with their stuff. The only
Mm.
reason they look that way is because they're covering up. They're proving something. Like
Wow.
I hear it in stories like the child has very good marks when they're in school or something, and they come home with a 98 or something, and the parent says, "Well, what happened to the 2%?" And so then right away, it's like, what happened to the 2%? Like they're still always put down that it doesn't matter how much they try. And
Mm.
so they go through life trying to always prove themselves. They always have to be the best. And that's where perfectionism comes from,
Yeah.
to try to
Wow.
prove yourself all the time. So,
I've never heard it explained that way, and that makes a lot of sense. I followed a lot on Instagram with just to educate myself, and so I had seen they go for the successful, educated, and the more people I'm interviewing, I'm like, "Oh, that's true." But you're right. That's what we all have in common, is that we had this hole inside. We're doing this to try to finally meet our parents' expectations, or to do it finally perfectly, which doesn't exist.
yeah,
Wow, I had never thought
exactly.
of it that way. If you think about your own experience, your work, would there be things that you listen for, like the hints that aren't as obvious, that when you hear it from a client, you're like, "Oh, there it is." You know what I mean? Like things that maybe our listeners could relate with to start. looking at, asking questions. If they already have this gut feeling or this intuition that maybe this isn't right, is there something you would point at and be like, that's maybe an orange flag? You know what I mean?
Yeah, not quite red enough.
Yeah. Or it
Um,
looks pink. It's behind the scenes, things that maybe not everybody would realize, but you can see out of your own experience, like this is a pattern and that is a clear indication or a maybe indication of something being not quite right.
there'd be a few things. Like one would be the person is quite negative, possibly. They're living in a doom and gloom. They're always feeling everything goes wrong. But one really big thing is what I find is that what I look for is a sign of codependency. And I notice it all the time. And it's even a person that's coming for counseling because they're stressed at work. And so
Okay.
then I'm like, okay, what's the root cause? I'm always asking, what's the root cause? And so I'm looking for things. And most of the time, or often, not most of the time, but often at work, the person's really stressed because, oh, it's too much work. I can't handle it. I had to stay late to finish this project. Or I find myself, especially if a person's working online, I find myself working all evening too, or that kind of thing. And that's a sign that it's codependency because they don't know how to say no and they
Oh.
have no boundaries. And then I'm like, okay, why would that be? Why does this person not have boundaries? And I quite quickly pull out my little codependency quiz. I got the
Oh, I remember
questionnaire.
that. Yeah.
Oh, did I do that with you?
You did do that with me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, I quite quickly pulled that out because I noticed those kinds of things. Looking for the root cause is really it's really a focus because many therapists will work with the symptoms. If the person's stressed at work, oh, like maybe you need to do some relaxation. Maybe you need to take a break and take a walk during your day. How are you eating or how are you sleeping? Different things like, and that all plays in there. But
Mhm.
I'm always looking for the root cause. And I think I do that because of what I come from in my own life. And
Mm.
because I know that insecurities at work, for instance, like when I always had insecurities at work
Mhm.
because it was a lack of confidence and where a person's extra stressed. And it depends on what they tell me, what they're stressed about. Sometimes it can be because they're experiencing a narcissistic manager or boss or a supervisor or something. That's
Mhm.
why they're stressed at work. But why is that narcissistic person able to stress them out the way they do, able to get under their skin? Most of the
Mhm.
time, root cause behind that is they're
Codependency.
vulnerable for some
Yeah.
reason.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's funny, you're bringing to memory in my grade 12 year in high school, I was really stressed out. I had switched from like a private school to a public school for the first time, and I was not used to this style of learning. Of course, not present to the dynamic of what has been going on at home for the last however many years. And I remember just being at my limit, and I went to the guidance office and I'm bawling and I'm like, I'm just so stressed out, this is a lot and I feel like I'm not learning. And he's like, how's everything at home? And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm stressed at school. But it's like, no, there were dynamics where I had no voice. I was like, I need help and no one's helping me. And
Yeah.
I like what you said about that you focus on the root cause. And I think that's one reason for me in all of the mental storm I was going through. And what I was worried about with therapy is like, I'm going to have to pay for like 20 hours before you'll possibly understand. I'm going to have to tell you everything. But even in one session with you, like the intake session, I just felt you could see through my words and I really felt seen by you. And I think that that is because you've been through so much, like whether it's your family of origin or your first marriage or what you do with clients. Like I really felt like you are an expert and a master of the cycle of abuse and working with clients. I appreciate your perspective on the root cause. It made a big difference for me.
Yeah. And we can take, I always have this saying, we can take what we've been through and let it destroy us. So it's like a stumbling block, but we can also take what we've been through and make it a stepping stone where it propels us to change the world or to help others who have gone through the same thing. And that's been my attitude is I'm going to use what I've been through to help other people, to understand other people, to give them a voice. And I don't know, that's why when it comes to root cause, and I've had a lot of people say to me, like, wow, I love it that you're looking at the root cause. I've never had this before in therapy. And they will come to see me just because of that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat.
Sure. I have told two people now, you practice in Canada. So anyone in Canada, I'm like, you need to go talk to Lorna. She's great. She will help you in minimum time. Like it's not, you weren't someone that was like millions and millions of sessions. It was like, it was efficient and you helped me really, really quick. One more question here. In terms of, okay, so if someone's trying to leave, we've heard it can take, I think 7 times the average of how long it takes someone to leave the cycle of abuse or a narcissistic situation. And one of the hot buzzwords these days is trauma bonding. Can you say a little about that?
Well, I used to always call myself brainwashed because you're convinced that you're the one at fault in the relationship because you've been told that so many times. And so you'd be stupid for leaving because you're causing all this, a lot of it. That's one thing. A lot of people, when it comes to the codependency, they think they're helping the abuser. They've actually often gotten into the relationship because they're wanting to fix this person or they're wanting to help them. Sometimes even somebody with like serious drug problems or whatever, they will get themselves involved in this person's life because they believe they are fixing. And that's of course the codependency. And they will do everything for them. They will pay for all kinds of things
Mm.
and they won't realize that this is not their job. So that's one thing that keeps them there. They're also often convinced that their friends and family don't care for them because the abuser has isolated them, right? And
Mhm.
and and talking about isolation too, the abuser will sometimes move them out somewhere away, pretty well away from civilization, so that they're very isolated. They cannot easily get help. Sometimes the abuser actually controls their phone completely. They will control their finances. I had an example of a client that the abuser was a car salesman and always controlled the car or what car there was and would always promise, I'll get you a car and never did. And but then when he finally did, he put a tracker on it. And
Oh,
like it so fear, of course, keeps a person going back. But trauma bonding is a little bit too, like we were saying before. If you meet, after you've been through trauma, if you meet somebody who's kind and nice, you actually don't know what to do with it because you don't recognize it. It's
yeah.
familiar to you to be with somebody who's abusive and you think this is just normal. Sometimes you're in a state of self sabotage. You feel like you deserve it because you've been convinced in your life that you're the biggest loser in the world. And so
Mm.
somehow you deserve it. My attitude with my first husband was, oh, I can handle this.
Yeah.
Or you step into it, but at the same time, naive. I was 18 when I met him. This will just be happily ever after.
Yeah.
No, even in the best of marriages, it's not always happily ever after.
Mhm.
So yeah, so those are some of the things that with trauma bonding. And then we tend to go back again and again. And like you mentioned, we want to leave and sometimes we do leave an abuser, but then we don't know what to do out in the world because we're scared of everything. We have no confidence. And so then we tend to go back
Mhm.
because that's what we know. And often sometimes the abuser is threatening, actually, I'm going to commit suicide if you leave or I'm gonna hurt your family. The victim is just so much in a state of fear a lot of times, or thinking they're taking all this responsibility, that they're this good person, all
Yeah.
kinds of things. Yeah. We're brainwashed in a lot of ways. And especially if we've experienced abuse when we're young, we already have so many cognitive distortions going on that we we don't even know how to think normally. Like we're convinced that, oh, I can handle this, or this isn't that bad. And I find an awful lot of victims are always saying, well, somebody else has it worse.
Yeah.
So why am I so troubled with what I'm going through? Or what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle this? Because somebody else has it worse. And they're trying to invalidate themselves because they don't realize that they just think that they must be stupid or making
Wow.
a big deal about it. And sometimes even coming to counseling and they're just like, I really don't know why I'm here. But
Yeah.
you know me, I go quite quickly into like what might be happening here and
Hmm.
really helping clients to see that this is not their fault, that
Yeah.
they've landed in this place for a reason. And I try to help them see that everyone has value. Everyone deserves safety and that nurture that what a child needs.
Mhm.
And some people have a very hard time seeing that because they just have never experienced it.
Yeah.
So very,
Yeah.
very confused. And so it takes time for them to be able to work through some cognitive distortions and
Hmm.
the belief system. I probably said this to you because I say this to clients often.
Yeah.
I say that from childhood, you're believing a whole bunch of big fat lies.
Yeah.
Because we believe all kinds of things about ourselves because we're taking responsibility, we're feeling guilty and shame, and sometimes we feel like a burden.
Mm.
So those are big fat lies from childhood. And so then we talk about what the truth actually is and what the value actually is and the distortions they're believing. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you do, for turning your own pain into a message and healing for others. You certainly made a difference for me. I would not be where I am now without you. So thank you from me and from all of our listeners, I hope. If you're in Canada and you want to talk more about this, book a session with Lorna. She is a literal angel. She will change your life. You won't need a lot of sessions. You will want them, but you won't need them. Lorna, thank you so
Yes.
much for your generous sharing today and the priceless education. This education made such a difference for me, and I feel honored to be able to help disperse it out and hopefully make a difference for anyone or anyone who knows anyone that might need it. So it's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and I'm so glad to see how well you're doing, and
Ah,
it's so amazing. It's so inspiring, and when we know what's going on in our life, suddenly we just take the bull by the horns and we just go. And that's what you did. Like you're just like,
yeah,
oh, I got all this knowledge, I got all this education. I can do something about this.
yeah,
Like some clients are more stuck in it for longer, but you really just went ahead and were just like, oh, okay. I didn't have
yeah.
to live this way.
Yeah, well,
You
it
know,
felt like I was frustrated because I had this blindfold and I'm like, I don't know what to think, right? And then you cleared it all up for me and I was like, oh, well, in that case, I know exactly what. So that was a
exactly.
huge benefit for me. Well, it's been such a wonderful time with you, such a wonderful interview. Where can people find you?
I do have a website. It's oaktreecounseling.me. And all you have
Wonderful.
to do is click book now and you'll get
Um,
the sessions that you can choose for yourself.
Perfect. Well, I hope that our listeners will do so. Otherwise, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did.